Every once in a while, I come back to my old videos and see that people still like them, and that's really nice. But I also see people asking if I've dropped off the face of the earth or if I died. I suppose an update is in order. I am alive and doing well. I just haven't posted many videos because I haven't made many costumes recently. I'll explain more about that, but I did want to share some of the costume work I have done in the 8 or so years since I last posted. I have made some costumes, I just didn't document them thoroughly enough to make videos about them. In 2013, I went to an opening night showing of Star Trek Into Darkness, and I wanted to be Spock. Mirror Universe Evil Spock, actually, so I grew a goatee and made some ear prosthetics from scratch. It was quite the journey to mold my ears with alginate, and then making 2-part plaster molds, and it was my first time working with fancy silicone, dyed with some paints. The final product worked okay in the end. Could have been neater around the edges, but it worked. In 2013, for Halloween at the office where I work, in a matter of just a few days, I whipped up a super cheap Iron Man costume. This was almost entirely made of thin poster board and spray paint with some LED lights on the hands and eyes. Maybe $20 worth of materials. My company's brand colors were white and orange, and the logo was a play button, so that's on the chest. I made a reputation for myself in the office that day. People started calling me Tony Stark. I did an updated version of my Optimus Prime cardboard suit. This was for Salt Lake City's first big Comic-Con. I only have a few photos of this, but you can see it's a bit bigger than the first one I made. I used milk crates for stilts to make me taller. It was probably my most attention-grabbing costume. There was a nice crowd that gathered around when I walked in, and it was really cheap to make too, so it was a good reward for the effort. For Halloween in 2014, I wanted to make something really ambitious. I began working on a costume of Otachi, the kaiju monster from Pacific Rim. I only had about a month to work on it, and I tried doing it, but a few days in I realized it was going to take way more time, so I stopped working, and I never actually finished it. I got far enough to make a sculpt of the head, and I ended up molding that, and I also made rough shapes for the arms and legs, and I did have big plans to make it really cool with LED lights down the body, make the wings on the arms fold out, the claws at the end of the tail would actually pinch, a battery-powered smoke machine would make smoky mist coming out of the mouth. Kind of a shame that I never continued it, but it was just too much for me to work on at that time. Fast forward to Halloween 2018. At the office where I work, the company had gotten bigger, and by then costume contests were more competitive. My team did a theme of Stranger Things, and I had never even seen the show before, but I did know about the Demogorgon. Of course that's what I chose to dress up as, and it was a time crunch. I only had a week to work on it. I did a quick repaint of my Cthulhu suit for the body. Most of my time was spent on making the head from scratch. I started with a baseball cap on the inside and some of these foam sheets and covered them with a silicone caulk thinned down with naphtha and colored with paints. I followed tutorials showing that if you use silicone caulk mixed with cornstarch, it gives you a sort of silicone dough that you can roll out and shape, and then it'll eventually set up firmer, and that's what these teeth are made out of. That worked out really well. And there actually was a mechanism I had, mostly made out of duct tape, attached to the end of the flap so that when I pulled it down, they would actually open up. The mechanism broke after my first few tries using it. But my team did end up winning contests for both the individual costume category and group category, so it was a success. And that's the most recent costume I've made. I don't really make costumes very much anymore. What drove my passion for making costumes and props was how much I loved movies as a kid, as a teenager, and through my college years. Especially Hollywood movies, big bombastic visuals that I found myself immersed in. But in college, when I was studying video production, I had script writing and film analysis classes, where the professors said on the first day of the course, after these classes, you won't be able to look at movies the same way again. And they were right. Hollywood movies aren't as fun to me anymore. I still very much respect the craft of filmmaking, and I do credit Star Wars and especially the fan film and fan art communities for inspiring so much of my creativity as a kid. And even today, movies like Aliens and Lord of the Rings still hold up really well. But it's hard for me to be immersed in a story, and instead I find myself analyzing behind the scenes aspects. Kind of like how a magician who knows how tricks are done, you're less interested in magic shows. These days I don't even watch new movies. The last Marvel movie I saw was Thor, the first one, back in 2011. But I have kept up with the Star Wars sequel trilogy. I had enough interest to watch that. They could have been worse, but I do agree with most of the criticisms. I think Episode 9 especially blew it for reasons others have explained countless times. I think the new Star Wars is for the new generation, and that's okay. Our tastes change as we grow up. Mine certainly have. Here's what my bedroom looked like 10 years ago. So much nerdy stuff everywhere. And here's what my bedroom looks like today. My interests have changed, and I think that's okay. I'm still glad that my videos have been able to entertain or inspire people, and I do look back on my creations with fondness. I love how I had confidence and I was always willing to share whatever I was doing, no matter how silly or amateur it actually was. I might post more costume videos in the future. I would never say never, but I have no immediate plans to. I still find ways to be creative and share my passions. In my day job, at the cool company I work at, Pluralsight, my job is maintaining quality for the video tutorials we produce. Tutorials about computer programming and IT and security, not geeky costumes, but I do get to help people make good video tutorials, which is something I really like. And I've been more creative with food than anything else recently. Because I actually like my coworkers, I found myself making tons of food, cupcakes, and macarons for holidays. I made fun things for birthdays. I made a cake that matched the exact blueprints of a house that my coworker was having built. I made a cake frosted like the dude's rug from Big Lebowski. So I still make movie things sometimes. I've found chocolate to be an interesting medium to work with. I've made a chocolate piano. I made a pretty large-scale Harley-Davidson motorcycle sculpture for an executive who was leaving the company. Chocolate is fun. Food ignites my interest similar to how movies and costumes did. It's all about making something completely from scratch that people enjoy. Food is great for that. I've started up a channel, Foodie Findings, where I'm posting videos of discoveries of food. I did a bunch of videos about vanilla, figuring out if pure extract really tastes better than imitation, how to find good vanilla, things like that. I'm currently doing experiments with croissants. That's up next. But sometimes I do creative, crafty things too. With the help of a friend, I made a real-world Vanellope's cart from Wreck-It Ralph, so the movie geek does live on in some form. Speaking of friends, shout out to my friend Kevin, who I made a bunch of videos with. You can follow him and his brother Kyle on Storycraft, where they talk about what makes a good story, and showing off all kinds of nerdy things like that. Probably the coolest thing I've done recently is dinosaur sculptures made out of chocolate. This was whittled out of a piece of solid chocolate. Skulls carved out of solid chocolate, and then the teeth made with a sugar and corn syrup modeling chocolate. And this Utah raptor is the most recent one I made that I really like. It kind of takes its inspiration from the poses of the velociraptors in Jurassic Park. There is a wire running down the length of the spine to give it some support, but other than that, this is made entirely out of chocolate, even the base. You can see the video of how I made these over on the Foodie Findings channel. So you might say the movie geek lives on more as the food geek. Hopefully there's some overlap between sculpting and costumes and food creativity that you'd be interested in subscribing the other channel to keep up with what I'm doing. If not, I still thank you for watching and stay geeky, my friends.